WTBQ.
Welcome to TG Wellbeing. This show is all about you, feeling and looking your best inside and out. Sharing advice, tips, and information from the leaders and experts in medicine, health, fitness, nutrition, sports science, healthy eating, and motivation. I am your host, Rob Fletcher, author of America's Next Great Trainer, Transform Your Life. You can check that out on Amazon. Follow me on Instagram at ANGTTV. Also, be sure to follow TG Wellbeing. TG Wellbeing airs every Saturday from 12:15 to 12:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Listen worldwide at WTBQ. Before we start our show, on behalf of my family, I would like to share our sincere gratitude and thanks to the U.S. Army, Honor Guard, Rockland County Sheriff's Department, Village of Suffern Police, Town of Ramapo Police, Lieutenant Tesseman, Sergeant Baker, Mayor Mike Curley, Rob and Steve Lancia, Sacred Heart Church, Monsignor William Belford, Father Mike, Wanamaker Funeral Home, and all our family and friends. Thank you for the most amazing, beautiful tribute to my father, Bob Fletcher Sr., who passed away last week. A U.S. Army paratrooper, 82nd Airborne, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. A great father, a great leader, most importantly, a great man. I'd also like to take this time to thank all our military and all those who serve and protect. God bless you, and thank you. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Brent Dorval, and he's going to give you a wealth of information in regards to food sensitivity, inflammation, and gut health. So I would like to welcome to the show Dr. Brent Dorval.
Great. Thank you very much, Rob, and thank you, everybody, for listening in. I am the Chief Scientific Officer of KBMO Diagnostics, and I've been in management of various diagnostic entities for quite some time, and I have a Ph.D. in medical microbiology and immunology from the College of Medicine at Ohio State University. I was on the World Health Organization Committee for Vaccines and Diagnostics, and I was a postdoc and a visiting scholar in the Department of Chemistry at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So with that intro, what I can say is that I've been in diagnostics for a long time, and about 20 years ago, I was looking at the market of diagnostics in general.
Well, Dr. Dorval, if you don't mind, I would just like to also point out, advisor to the World Health Organization Committee, and also I want to go back. So you have 35 years experience, because our topic today is so important to our listeners in regards to gut health, inflammation, and the dramatic or traumatic impact it can have on the human body. So before we go forward, could you explain immunoassay methods and analyte detection for the listeners?
Sure. The food sensitivity test that we're going to discuss today is based on a laboratory procedure, and it's called an ELISA. And that simply is a way to measure antibodies that are produced in your body. So what we've done with this test is we take various food antigens, colorings, additives, and we attach them to a plastic plate. And then what we do is we add the serum sample or dried blood spot sample to the well of the plate that contains the food antigen. So many food antigens. And then what we do is we add a reagent that will allow us to see if you have antibodies against that particular food coloring or additive. The novel thing that we've done with the FIT test, the food inflammation test, is we use two different ways to measure your antibody so that we get good sensitivity and specificity. So sensitivity means you don't miss true positives, and good specificity means that you don't have any false positives. So that's very important in immunoassays and measuring various analytes. So these antibodies in your blood are generated against various food antigens, so little pieces of the proteins that are in food. And when you produce that antibody, what happens is it will be in the bloodstream, and when it's added to the plate, we can simply measure what's going on from there. And we measure not only the antibody, which is called IgG, but we measure a complement protein. Now, that's another set of proteins in the body, which are very useful because they get rid of bad things. So these antibodies bind to a food antigen. So they bind together, and they activate this system of proteins that is called complement. So it's a series, about 30 proteins in the blood, and we don't want to go in that in detail. But what happens is something that's very beneficial is when that complement protein binds, the red blood cells in your body pick it up, much like a shuttle bus picks up children and takes them to school. The red cell binds to this immune complex and brings it to the liver and the spleen, where it's degraded normally. Now, most people, that process happens over and over again, and it happens quickly. In some people, however, they have maybe deficient red cells, or they don't clear these immune complexes quickly. So what happens is they start to deposit places. They deposit in blood vessels, or in the kidney, or in the heart, or the brain. And then what they do is set up a situation where you have a long-standing reaction of complement, and you get inflammation and even lysis of your own cells. So what we do is we take advantage of the fact that that complement protein binds to the antibody. So we measure that complement protein plus the IgG. So we get two signals that we can tell if an antibody is binding to a particular food antigen. So that is kind of the basis of the FIT test by KBMO Diagnostics.
So do you think most people recognize the true impact gut health has on the human body in regards to optimal performance?
No, I don't, but it's becoming ever-increasing importance just in the past few years. Gut health is absolutely critical, not only for food sensitivities, but for many other things as well. But where it plays a significant role in food sensitivities is that if you have an underlying medical condition, maybe diabetes or arthritis, or you've had a treatment for cancer, or you got Lyme disease and you took a course of doxycycline, what happens is all these processes and antibiotics, they can damage the gut. And when they damage the gut, by that I mean the gut starts to become leaky. So you have cells that line your gut that are coated with mucus, of course, and bacteria. When that gets disrupted, the space between the cells opens up. And what happens is they call it leaky gut. And now things can get from the lumen or the outside that they're not excreted, food is not excreted normally. What happens is these food particles start to get through the porous membrane in your gut. And then what they do is set up a situation where you start to produce antibodies. So the food particle antigen causes antibodies to be produced. And antibodies do exactly what they should do. The antibodies then seek out and bind to these food antigens. And that's called an immune complex. So antibodies are formed, immune complexes subsequently formed, and then the immune complex activates complement, which then sets one up for various rounds of inflammation. And the inflammation is what we're seeing as a food sensitivity. So various symptoms that you may have, fatigue or brain fog or arthritic conditions, what happens is the common denominator for all those is inflammation. So these immune complexes then generate the inflammation, and what the patient experiences is a wide variety of symptoms as a result of that.
So I work with TG, the gym, and TG Wellbeing. So many of the demographics, we work with all sorts of people, but we work with many high-end athletes, pro bodybuilders. That what kind of impact, once they recognize their body's sensitive to certain foods, what kind of impact could an elite athlete or someone at that level who does train, who does work out consistently, what kind of results and how would that impact their performance?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, because let me just digress just for a second. We see basically three groups of clients at KBMO. We see those that are sick. So they're truly sick. They have some underlying condition, and food sensitivities simply exacerbate that condition. And then we see another group that simply want to optimize their health. They want to find out, do I have a food sensitivity? And if I remove it, hopefully I'll feel a little better. But they're not truly sick. But lastly, we see another group that want to improve their performance. And we've tested many pro athletes from surfers to baseball players to football and basketball. So we've covered it all. And what they do is they want to improve their performance. And what they found is that they can identify foods that generally cause these antibodies to be produced, and they remove them from the diet. What they find is they don't fatigue as often. They have better stamina overall, and I think that's what they're looking for. They even say that sometimes they've got better motor skills. So it's the fine tuning of the body by identifying foods that cause these immune complexes to form. You fine tune the body and you optimize the performance. And we've heard quite a few testimonials to a variety of things like that from professional athletes.
Well, I'm going to confirm and give you a testament to that. Two very close friends out in San Diego at TG Chula Vista, elite bodybuilders, their results in 3 weeks is incredible. And these are high-end athletes. They train hard every day, and they've taken the food sensitivity test, and foods that they thought they possibly were sensitive to that could cause inflammation, they were correct. And so they've eliminated some of those foods. So in all respects, the way they feel, their performance has dramatically improved. So you're talking about high-end, highly trained athletes that are doing this every day. So I wanted to know from your insights and the people that you work with if you were seeing the same thing. So, inflammation dropped, their joints were better. And then Steve, he had a pec repair, and everything seems to be healing at a faster rate with the lower amount of inflammation happening in the body.
Right. I mean, yeah, and that's the cornerstone, really, of food sensitivities, is the generation of inflammation. And when you identify a food that causes inflammation and you remove it from the body, we hear it over and over again, the patient or the client feels better. I mean, sometimes it won't. If you have an underlying rheumatoid arthritis or something like that, or a severe arthritic problem, and you've got degradation of the bone or the joint. Now, these tests won't cure anybody, but the goal is to identify foods that cause inflammation and remove them from the body. And when you do that, patients and clients overwhelmingly feel better. And as you just said, their performance is enhanced fairly substantially in many ways. Anything, like I say, from it could be eyesight, it could be fine motor skills, it could be overall stamina, and we do hear that pretty much across the board.
Well, we are with Dr. Brent Dorval. Dr. Dorval, we're going to be back in a couple of minutes, but before we go to break, I want to take a moment to recognize our sponsors and partners, TG The Gym, locations in San Diego and Mesa, Arizona, TG Wellbeing, Mobile MD, providing blood work and food sensitivity testing, injectables and IV, hormone balancing, TRT, HRT, and medical weight loss. And please be sure to check us out at Jake Wood's NPC Wings of Strength Valley of the Sun Championships, April 9th at the Rawhide Event Center in Chandler, Arizona. Find out more at wingsofstrength.net, Instagram at Wings of Strength. Jake is the owner of the worldwide premier event of bodybuilding and fitness, the Olympia Weekend, and also fitness publications, Muscle and Fitness and Muscle and Fitness Hers. You're listening to TG Wellbeing. We'll be right back.
John S. Burke Catholic High School in Goshen is a co-ed preparatory school that promotes academic rigor, respect, values, and responsibility. Burke Catholic will shape students' talents and abilities academically, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Burke Catholic teaches young men and women the spirit of Catholic Christian values, how to demonstrate civic responsibility, and to become leaders who will positively impact and serve the world. For admission information, visit burkecatholic.com or schedule a tour to learn more.
Introducing High Society, your source for cannabis industry news, restorative justice initiatives, community impact, dispensary openings, and cultivation tips. Brought to you by the editors of Chronogram. Get updates every week with our High Society newsletter. It's high time to talk about marijuana legalization in New York. Welcome to High Society. You're in good company. Sign up now at chronogram.com/high society.
Let's face it, times have changed. The way we interact with people, where we buy products, and how we find information. Catskill Marketing will get you up to speed with a full range of marketing services by focusing on website design with emphasis on e-commerce, social media management, graphic design, branding, and search engine marketing. Catskill Marketing uses the latest technology combined with their expertise translates to increased revenue for your business. Contact us now at catskillmarketing.com.
The law firm of Beatty & Krahulik, founded in 1872, provides sophisticated legal services to businesses and individuals throughout the Orange County area. As the oldest law firm in Orange County, the firm has developed a reputation of providing the highest quality client service. This is attorney Bob Krahulik, the lawyer guy here on WTBQ Radio. Call for a free consultation at 986-1155. That's 986-1155 at hudsonvalleylaw.us.
Hi, this is Tom Fursey. Sing along and relive the memories of the 1980s on The Magic of the 80s. Saturday night starting at 6 on WTBQ, playing the best music.
Magic of the 80s. WTBQ.
Welcome back. We are here with Dr. Brent Dorval. The topic is food sensitivity. So, Doctor, we left off talking about high-end athletes and the impact that once they discover their food sensitivities, the dramatic difference that they see, both physically and the way they feel, optimizing their body inside and out. So there's food sensitivities, there's food allergies, and there's food intolerance. Can you explain or differentiate those things?
Sure, absolutely. So everybody hears these terminology tossed around, and a lot of times it's marginally accurate, to say the least. But food allergy, now a true allergy, that's mediated by another type of antibody called IgE. And that's an immediate reaction. So that's the one where a student eats peanut butter and they're allergic to peanuts, and they need what they call is an EpiPen, because they're going to go into anaphylactic shock. That means their airways shut down, their vessels start to close up, and they're having a very, very severe reaction. So that's what IgE does.
And then, Doctor, can you just, one more time, what is IgE for our listeners?
Yes, IgE is an antibody. It's different than IgG that causes food sensitivity. And the reaction of the IgG antibody that's in your bloodstream is immediate, so that if you get stung by a bee in 30 or 60 seconds, you could have what they call anaphylaxis, which is a serious event where your lungs, airways close up, your vessels start to shut down, and you can die. So they give you epinephrine, or the so-called EpiPen, so that will bring you around. Now, by contrast, food sensitivity is also in what they call an immunologic reaction, but it's mediated by different types of antibodies, and those are IgG antibodies. Now, what's significant about them, about IgG, is that the reaction, you may eat a food on Monday, and you may not have a reaction to Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So the reactions are called delayed or delayed type hypersensitivity. So that's why a test for food sensitivity is so important, because if you're not feeling well on Wednesday and you may have consumed the food on Monday, it's hard to pinpoint which food. So by testing your blood for antibodies, what we can do is identify foods that potentially cause a food sensitivity, and then we can bring about an evidence-based elimination diet. So the idea is to identify potential sensitivities, the IgG, and then remove the foods from the diet, and then add them back in a systematic way to see if those foods trigger any sort of food sensitivity. It could be a headache. It could be, again, brain fog, fatigue, gut problems. You name it, food sensitivities are probably involved at one level or another. Now, lastly, there's food intolerance, and that's a non-immunologic reaction. So antibodies are not involved in that reaction, and the one that I think is familiar to everybody is a lactose intolerance, which occurs because a person doesn't make an enzyme that can degrade the sugar lactose, so you can't consume milk or milk products. So that's simply an intolerance. Another one is with wheat, especially there's a fraction in there that's called gliadin, and that's really in the news pretty frequently. And that's directly toxic to the epithelium, so the cells that coat the gut. So what happens, some people that eat wheat, it's toxic to their gut, and so what happens there is a molecule called zonulin, and that's a protein is produced, which then opens up the junctions between the cells and makes your gut leaky, so-called leaky gut. So that's very important in people, because that directly is toxic to the gut epithelium and can really wreak havoc in many, many people.
So people can develop sensitivities over a period of time, meaning maybe at one time they weren't sensitive to a particular food, but they become sensitive to a particular food. Is that correct?
Oh, that's absolutely correct. And it's because, like I say, it could be someone who got Lyme disease. And so what you did is you treated them with an antibiotic. The antibiotic now has a directly toxic effect on the gut. It kills the gut, so-called bacteria, the microbiome in the gut that coats it, kills the bacteria, damages the gut, and now you've got a leaky gut. So food antigens that never could get through the gut wall, now because the gut is damaged, they can get through and now set yourself up for food sensitivities as a result, or someone being treated with chemotherapy, or certain diseases, again, type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes. People are prone to bacterial infections of certain types that then damage the gut and set you up for the end result, which is inflammation.
How much credit do you think people give to inflammation causing chronic disease? Like, in other words, they think of inflammation, but do you think they really think of the end result of what inflammation can do to the body, the damage and the host of problems?
You know, it's one of those things, especially with food sensitivity. I think there's definitely an increased awareness, certainly in the past 18 or 19 years since I've been involved in food sensitivity, and it's really become kind of the cornerstone of what people will say causes certain symptoms. So there's a good recognition now that inflammation definitely, especially long-term inflammation, causes a wide variety of things. And not to digress, but my background was I studied complement a long time ago when I was in school. And what I realized was that complement, this series of proteins, they generate molecules that are acutely inflammatory in the body. There's two in particular. They call them C3A and C5A. And I don't want to get too technical, but just remember, complement produces these proteins which cause acute inflammation in the body. And so that's why we got the idea with the FIT test, that we patented it, by the way, to measure IgG. So we measure the antibody, but we measure the inflammatory component right on the antibody, because that tells us that complement has been activated, and by definition, inflammation was the result. Now, it can be a lot of inflammation or a little, so there's a difference in the magnitude, but the fact that molecule has been generated tells us inflammation is either past or ongoing in the body.
Incredible. We are with Dr. Brent Dorval. The test that you offer, it's so beneficial. And one of the things that we do at TG, this word came up several times in our conversation, is education and raising awareness. People may know about the food sensitivity, and many may not. But the fact that we're here speaking about it to strongly encourage other people to start looking at food sensitivities, inflammation, and really what could be the end result of chronic disease and illness and the way they perform, not only in a sport or activity, but throughout their daily way of life.
Yeah, no, again, that's absolutely correct. And I mean, this area of food sensitivity testing really developed in Europe long before it came over to the United States. And there was an awareness many years ago that food which you consumed definitely had an impact on your health. And that slowly trickled over here to America, and it's becoming more and more evident that food definitely plays a role in how people feel, how people perform, and even how people think. So it's this increased awareness, as you just mentioned, that's very, very important. And a lot of times, people will just say, well, I don't feel real well, or I have general malaise, or some nondescript symptom. And what you find is that very often food sensitivities are involved with that. And also mood and anxiety, because what happens is food sensitivities generate these molecules, and these molecules can get into the brain. And when they do, they can affect your mood and anxiety. So it's not unusual to see some of these rather nondescript symptoms associated with a food sensitivity. And when you identify which food or foods cause the sensitivity and remove it from the body, these people get well pretty quickly.
Well, that's a great point, because today especially, here we are 2 years through this craziness that we've been through. The amount of increased attention to mental health causing depression, as you mentioned, anxiety, PTSD. But just think of the value that it brings to people once they discover what their bodies are sensitive to, how that can dramatically affect, as you just said, their moods, which could be a game changer for many people.
Yes, and it's a concept now that's very, very well understood in many ways, and they call it the gut-brain axis. So that the gut and the brain kind of talk to each other, so to speak, and they do this by sending chemical messages back and forth that trigger certain things. And what it's found is when you have food sensitivities and or you have a disruption in the gut microbiome, that it directly has an impact on the brain. So it's important in many of these people to identify the foods and food additives many times that cause a sensitivity. And as I mentioned, they'll get better pretty quickly. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight, but it's generally it's a few-month process, but slowly they'll start to feel better. Their gut will heal. That's the other important part of this is if you have leaky gut, what happens is it will take a while for it to heal. So clients should be patient with that. Nothing happens. You didn't get a food sensitivity overnight, and it's not going to be cured overnight. So what you do is just be patient, and it'll take a few months. These tight junctions that are between the cells that have been disrupted will reform, and then you'll really start to see the effect, and you'll start to feel better, much, much better.
We are with Dr. Brent Dorval from KBMO FIT Test. We have a couple more minutes, Doctor. So before we go, and then of course we have part 2 coming up next week. But what is the difference between the KBMO FIT Test and the other tests that are out there?
Well, the KBMO test is a dual pathway measurement. So again, don't want to get too technical, but it measures both the acquired immunity and the innate immunity, and I can break that down. So the acquired immunity is the generation of an antibody. So that means you've consumed something, it gets through the gut, gets into the cells, the lymphoid cells, and now you produce an antibody. So you acquire the ability to produce that antibody as a result of exposure to something. It could be a vaccine, like a COVID vaccine or something. That's an acquired immunity. We also measure innate immunity, and that's the complement piece. That's the piece that generates the inflammation. And innate means that's always in your body. You don't have to stimulate it. You don't have to add any food antigens to really trigger it to produce the inflammatory molecules. What happens is the acquired immune system then triggers the innate immunity, which is the complement piece that generates inflammation. And then what we do at KBMO is we measure both the acquired immunity, which is the IgG piece, and then we measure the innate piece that generates the inflammation. Now, I will get a little technical.
Dr. Dorval, unfortunately, we have to continue this, which is great, though, for part 2. So we're going to pick up next week and pick up where we left off. But I greatly appreciate you joining us today, Dr. Brent Dorval, KBMO Diagnostics. Now tune in next week, and we'll continue our conversation. Dr. Dorval, thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to having you back next week. This is Rob Fletcher, host of TG Wellbeing. Again, we thank our sponsors and partners, TG The Gym, locations in San Diego and Mesa, Arizona, TG Wellbeing, Mobile MD. And also be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Have an amazing weekend, TG Wellbeing. Tune in, and it may change your life.